Correction about my current affiliation. I'm currently affiliated to the Institute of Language Studies and Research, which has got the School of Translation and Cultural Studies. Along with that, I'm also affiliated through my previous affiliation to the Kazi University. So that correction was necessary. And I'm happy to have with me today three very distinguished speakers, Professor Avvek Majumder, Rindon, who is very well known and dear to me, and I'm sorry, I have forgotten the name, Mr. Ramaswamy, I beg your pardon. So Mr. Ramaswamy is very well known, as it was just announced, for his translation into English various Bangla fictional works. Now, I have been entrusted to run the talk session today, and we have been listening to different deliberations, and also about the publishing house, Kyoto Publishers. And I could see from the flyers and from the display outside that the Kyoto Publishers have published so many works from different languages, I assume, languages. And if I'm not mistaken, I had a look at their outlet at the Kolkata book fair, where I could see various titles on display. Now, the subject of the talk that we are supposed to continue with is the importance of translation and linguistic transference in the domain of cross-cultural dialogue and cross-cultural communication. Now, I think I could see that there are school students and there are scholars, civil society members present there in the house here, and they're quite well aware about the fact that translation is extremely important. That goes without saying. I need not and we need not speak about it more. But what we can do is to relate the importance of translation in today's context, which is the context of a globalized world. We talk about a borderless world. We can transport and we can transfer and we can move to different countries, to different places. We can have constant dialogue through the social media, through the internet, through other means, to different cultural actors and people from different countries. So it is expected that in a globalized world, along with the easy flow and exchange of goods and economic transaction, we also have equal amount of knowledge transfer and cultural transference. For that, translation assumes more importance. So therefore, it goes without saying that in a globalized world, along with economic globalization, commercial globalization, there should be a necessity of knowledge globalization, epistemic globalization, cultural globalization. Whether that is happening, that is the question. In one way, we can say that we have a one-way traffic when we talk about translation. There is the tendency that we translate text only into the English language, because that is what we mostly talk about. There is perhaps also a necessity of vernacularization. The British Council director was talking about vernacularization. He was referring to a play where the Westland was vernacularized to a certain extent. He was referring to the references in the Westland of T.S. Eliot, of Indian philosophical references and thematics. So therefore, there is a growing need not only to translate English text into the Bangla, at the same time there is a necessity on the other way around, which is translating different text located in different corners of India itself. For example, last night we had a program with Mr. Perumal Murugan. The program was conducted online, and the program was initiated by a collective called Radical Books, and it was jointly organized by the Radical Books Collective and some faculty members of the University of Central Florida. Mr. Perumal Murugan was himself present during the show, and he was speaking in Tamil, and his words were being translated into the English language by one gentleman. So the event went on very well, The event was organized to talk about his recent novel, The Pyre, which has been translated into the English language and which has got longlisted for the Booker Prize. So we got to know about that novel through the discussion that we had yesterday. So when we talk about translation, please keep in mind that it's not just only translation of foreign books, but it is also necessary that we get to know about regional texts, be it in Tamil, be it in Malayalam, or in other languages written in India. Even within West Bengal, we do not know that there are so many languages being spoken in the hills, in the northern part of Bengal, in other parts of West Bengal, for example, in the Sundarban areas, in the western part of Bengal, in Purulia, in the Rar regions, there are so many languages. Also in the Medinipur regions, there are so many languages that we are not familiar with. So it is necessary that we widen the context and frame of translation and include texts which are written within the state, outside the state, in different other states of India, and at the same time get to know about foreign books being translated into the English language or regional languages. Before I pass it over to my colleagues here, I'd also like to mention that the Frankfurt Book Fair is supposed to be the biggest book fair in the world. It is known as a very important book fair because publishers from across the globe, including university press publishers, would assemble at Frankfurt to talk about future policies of book publications, etc. And last year in the Frankfurt Book Fair, and I was fortunate to be present there, the thematic of the Frankfurt Book Fair 2022 was translation. So from that you can understand that how much importance is being attached to the role and function of translation. This year, Frankfurt Book Fair will be celebrating its 75th year, and this is going to be a big event. So across the world, people are realizing and recognizing the importance of translation. And when I say translation, it has to be multilingual, two-way traffic. It's not just we are translating books from outside India. Indian books are to be translated. I think that is most important. There are school students who are listening, so they are potential future translators. Who knows? That last year the Booker Prize was given to Gitanjali Sri. For the first time, a translated book from India got the Booker Prize. And this is a big event. And this year, Mr. Perumal Murugan's book has been long listed. So you never know that barrier of English is going out. And it is high time that we attach this importance to the act of translation. The more we translate, the more we can foreground and project our immense and enriching literary and cultural resources available in India. I can surely say with confidence, and I guess all of you will agree, and all my colleagues will also agree, that there are wonderful writers in Bengal whose works I think can be compared easily to the best writers of the world. But people do not know about them simply because we do not translate them. I think a poet like Jivanananda, a poet like Shankha Ghosh are world-class writers. But we do not translate them, and that's why people do not know across the globe about their excellence, about their merits. So it is necessary that we also move beyond Kolkata. And as I said, that in our institute, the Institute of Language Studies and Research, about which the director, Dr. Shati Go, mentioned in the beginning in the inaugural session, we have a project called the Microtext, project on the microtexts of Bengal. So when we talk about Bengal, we always focus on the center stage, what is being written in Kolkata. But it is also necessary to widen the frame, as I said, and to go up in the north, in the other corners of West Bengal. And there are amazing pieces being written, of which we do not know. So I think through translation, we can we can build the bridges, and can communicate, and we can get in touch with all those voices. And the situation is perfect. With publishers coming into the fray and offering the possibility of translating books. There are so many publishers nowadays who are interested in publications, and as I said, the Frankfurt Book Fair celebrated the act of translation as the core theme of 2022 Frankfurt Book Fair. So it is high time that we focus on translation, and we understand that in a borderless, disbordered, globalized world, a writer from Bengal would be rubbing shoulder with a writer at New York, and they would be treated at par, equally, and not as a writer in a third world country, or not as a writer who is writing in a regional language. Writers are writers. There is nothing called regional writers or mainstream writers or center stage writers. Writers are writers, poets are poets, and all are great. Just there is a difference of linguistic barrier. There is a problem of global standard English dominating the soul, which Professor Emily Apter has called it Globish. There's a dominance of Globish, global standard English, as if that is the only gateway to get excellence and recognition. I think that has to go, that needs to go, to equalize and to democratize the situation so that we can proudly flaunt and foreground our writers from this part of the world. With that note, I hand it over to Professor Avvek Majumder and then the rest of the speakers who will also speak on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anindya. And this is really a privilege to be here. I'd like to thank Kyoto Publishing and Professor Shati Guho for inviting me. আমার যেটা প্রথম কথা বলার, যে কথাটা এতক্ষণ আমরা শুনলাম, সেই কথাটাই একটু অন্য দিক থেকেও আমরা ভাবতে পারি। আমার এক বন্ধু যিনি অনুবাদক, তার চাকরি গিয়েছিল একটা কারণে। সেই গল্পটা দিয়ে আমি শুরু করি। কোনো একটি কোম্পানিতে সে চাকরি করত, অনুবাদকের চাকরি। বিজ্ঞাপনগুলোকে অনুবাদ করা হতো এবং যিনি ছিলেন সেই কনসার্নের ডিরেক্টর, তিনি একজন অবাংলাভাষী। যাই হোক, তাকে একটি অনুবাদ করতে দেওয়া হয়েছিল, সেটা দ্যাট কপি সেজ 100% পিওর। সে অনুবাদ করেছিল 16 আনা খাঁটি। তো চাকরি দিয়েছিল, কেননা তার বস চেয়েছিলেন ওটা হবে 100% শুদ্ধ। এখানে যে প্রসঙ্গটা তোলা হয়েছে, আমি মনে করি সেটা খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ প্রসঙ্গ। When we are translating, it is not only language-oriented factor. We are also translating the cultures. সংস্কৃতিকে অনুবাদ করা খুব কঠিন কথা। আসলে একটা ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজ থেকে আরেকটা ল্যাঙ্গুয়েজে যাওয়া একটা মাত্রায় কিন্তু সহজ, কিন্তু একটা সংস্কৃতি থেকে একটা সংস্কৃতিতে যাওয়া অতটা সহজ নয়। কেননা একটা শব্দের আপনি একটা অভিধান করলে আপনি একটা তার ট্রান্সলেটেড ওয়ার্ড পেয়ে যেতে পারেন। সাজালেই কি অনুবাদ হয়? হয় না। তার কারণ বাক্যটাও একটা সাংস্কৃতিক উত্তরাধিকার। শুধু বাক্যটাই সাংস্কৃতিক উত্তরাধিকার নয়, তার ভেতরের অন্যায়গুলোও সাংস্কৃতিক উত্তরাধিকার। আবার মনে করিয়ে দেব যে 19 শতকে একটা বাংলা টেক্সট থেকে একটা ইংরেজি টেক্সটে যাওয়া, অথবা একটা ইংরেজি টেক্সট থেকে একটা বাংলা টেক্সটে আনা। ধরা যাক 19 শতকে আপনি বসে পড়ছেন, আপনার ভাষা যা হবে 21 শতকে ভাষা তা হবে না। কেননা ভাষাও পাল্টায়, কেননা সংস্কৃতি পাল্টায়। একজন অনুবাদকের স্ট্র্যাটেজি, we always hear from them that a strategy is needed. স্ট্র্যাটেজি ব্যাপারটা ঠিক কি, আমি অনেককে প্রশ্ন করে বুঝতে চেয়েছি। আমি একটা সহজ সরল সমাধান আপনাদের কাছে দিতে পারি, সেটা হচ্ছে আমি যেভাবে এগোই, কে কি কবে কখন কোথায়, কে টেক্সটটা লিখেছেন, কি টেক্সটটা লিখেছেন, কবে লিখেছেন, কখন লিখেছেন, কোথায় লিখেছেন। এই কে কি কেন কবে কোথায়, এইটার উপর নির্ভর করে আপনার স্ট্র্যাটেজি তৈরি আর সব থেকে গুরুত্বপূর্ণ থাকে হু ইজ ইউর টার্গেট রিডার। When we are translating, say, folk tales or fairy tales, maybe, আপনার ভাষা যা হবে, আর একজন কন্টেম্পোরারি নভেল রাইটার, তার নভেল আপনি ইউ আর ট্রান্সলেটিং ইন্টু বাংলা। আমি বাংলা নিয়ে এত কথা বলছি কেননা আমি সবসময় অনুবাদ করেছি বাংলায়। আমার একমাত্র বাংলাতেই একটু প্রবেশাধিকার আছে, আর ইংরেজিতে লিমিটেড অ্যাক্সেস। তো যাই হোক, আমি সবসময় মনে করি যে when we are translating, we have to underline who is our target reader. একটা ফেয়ারি টেল যখন আপনি অনুবাদ করছেন, যখন আপনার টার্গেট রিডার মোস্টলি আন্ডার 14, তখন আপনার ভাষা যেরকম হবে নিশ্চয়ই সেটা আপনি যখন কমল কুমার মজুমদারকে ধরা যাক ইংরেজিতে নিয়ে যাচ্ছেন, সম্ভব কিনা আমি সে বিষয়ে যাচ্ছি না, অথবা এমনকি শীর্ষেন্দু মুখোপাধ্যায়কে ইংরেজিতে নিয়ে যাচ্ছেন, অথবা ধরা যাক গোর্কিকে বাংলায় নিয়ে আসছেন, একের পর এক মুরাকামিকে বাংলায় নিয়ে আসছেন, তখন নিশ্চয়ই আপনার ভাষা একই থাকবে না। আমার মনে হয় এই স্ট্র্যাটেজির জায়গাটায় ইজ ভেরি ইম্পর্টেন্ট ফর আস, ফর দ্য ট্রান্সলেটার্স। কবিতা অনুবাদ তো আরেকটা ভীষণ কঠিন বিষয়। মেনচৌবি নামের একজন বিখ্যাত কবি আছেন মণিপুরের। আমরা সাহিত্য একাডেমির পক্ষ থেকে তার কবিতা অনুবাদ করেছি বাংলায়, এবং সেটা সাহিত্য একাডেমি থেকে ইট হ্যাজ বিন পাবলিশড। মেনচৌবির কবিতা যখন আমরা অনুবাদ করেছিলাম, উই ওয়েন্ট টু মণিপুর অ্যান্ড উই স্টেড দেয়ার ফর নিয়ারলি এ মান্থ অর সো। কেননা ওই আমাদের মেনচৌবির কবিতার মধ্যে নানা ধরনের রেফারেন্সেস আসে, নানা ধরনের, their tradition, their heritage, mythologies, so many things. তো আমরা মেনচৌবির সঙ্গে, আমি এবং আরেকজন ট্রান্সলেটর আমার সঙ্গে ছিলেন, সুমন্ত, আমার ছাত্র অধ্যাপক, আমি আর সুমন্ত মেনচৌবি এবং তার আরেকজন বান্ধবী, এদের সঙ্গে অদ্ভুত অদ্ভুত জায়গায় যেতাম, কারণ টু ফাইন্ড আউট দ্য রেফারেন্সেস। যেটা আমি ট্রান্সলেট করবো সেটা সম্পর্কে কিছুই জানি না, শুধু শব্দ ট্রান্সলেট করলে হয় না। ফলে মণিপুরে গিয়ে এত ইম্ফলের নানা একেবারে অজানা, অচেনা এবং একেবারে নাম নেই এরকম সব জায়গায় উই হ্যাড টু গো টু ফাইন্ড আউট দ্য রেফারেন্সেস। আমাদের মনে হয়েছিল যে ওই রেফারেন্সগুলো চোখে না দেখলে, এবং ওই রেফারেন্সগুলোর হোয়াট আর দ্য সিগনিফিকেন্সেস, what are the meanings, why she has used that, এগুলো না জানলে অনুবাদ করা যাবে না। কতগুলো শব্দ কি ভাষান্তর, কি অনুবাদ, ভাষান্তর কি তর্জমা, আমার মনে হয় না। আমরা দুটো শব্দ কি একই ইকুইভ্যালেন্সে ব্যবহার করি বটে, কিন্তু ভাষা শুধু পাল্টায় না। সো মেনি থিংস, একটা শব্দের সঙ্গে কত কি জুড়ে আছে। শুধু তো সিগনিফায়ার আর সিগনিফায়ারের খেলা নয়, এটা ইজ এ কালচারাল অ্যাক্সেস টু অ্যানাদার কালচারাল স্ফিয়ার। তো আমার মনে হয় এই স্ট্র্যাটেজির দিকটা, এবং কে, কেন, কবে, কি, কোথায়, এই প্রশ্নগুলো একজন অনুবাদকের কাছে খুব গুরুত্বপূর্ণ। যে কথাটা অনিন্দবাবু ভীষণ দারুণ বলেছেন। দেখবেন সোয়াহিলি অনুবাদও, বাংলা থেকে সোয়াহিলিতে অনুবাদ হচ্ছে, অথবা ভাষা ইন্দোনেশিয়ায় অনুবাদ হচ্ছে, এটা আপনারা দেখতে পাবেন না, এবং উল্টোটাও সত্য নয়। ফলে আমরা কিন্তু ধরেই নিয়েছি যে সোয়াহিলি ভাষায় ভালো কবিতা লেখা হয় না, অথবা ভালো উপন্যাস লেখা হয় না। ধরা যাক আমরা ধরেই নিয়েছি যে এইসব ভাষার কোনো প্রান্তিক, এইসব ভাষা নিয়ে ভেবে কি হবে। এখন এই ইফ উই আর সো ইউরোসেন্ট্রিক, তাহলে কিন্তু অনুবাদের যে ডিব্যাবেলাইজেশনের কথাটা বলা হয়, সেই ডিব্যাবেলাইজেশনটা হবে না। সবাই যদি ইংরেজি নিয়েই মাথা ঘামাতে থাকি, আর ইংরেজি নিয়েই মুগ্ধ শিবনেত্র হয়ে যাই, তাহলে কিন্তু মুশকিল। আমি ধন্যবাদ জানাবো সবাইকে, অর্গানাইজারদের, অনিন্দবাবুকে, আমার পরের বক্তা রিন্দন, এবং আমাদের এই প্যানেলের যারা রয়েছেন তারা গুরুত্বপূর্ণ কথা বলবেন। অনুবাদকে আমি চাইব একটা জটিল পদ্ধতি হিসেবে দেখা, এবং অনুবাদক, এবং আরেকটা জিনিস শেষে মাফ করবেন, আমি একটু সময় নিচ্ছি, একটা দুটো বাক্য বলবো। অনুবাদকের কিন্তু কোনো মূল্য নেই। দেখবেন কলেজ স্ট্রিট পাড়া বা যে কোনো জায়গায়, যার জন্য আমি এই পাবলিশিংয়ের ডাকে এসেছি, যে কোনো জায়গায় অনুবাদক, ইউ আর এ ট্রান্সলেটার বলি একটা অদ্ভুত হাসি হাসে। অনুবাদক কি বাদক, তবলা, এরকম একটা মুখ করে। মানে অনুবাদক হওয়া কিন্তু সহজ কথা নয়। মনে রাখবেন, অনুবাদক একজন ফার্স্ট গ্রেড রিডার, অনুবাদক একজন ফার্স্ট গ্রেড ক্রিয়েটার। কিন্তু যে কোনো একটা হলেই আমরা অনেক হাততালি দিই, অনুবাদকের কোনো হাততালির জায়গা নেই। ধন্যবাদ।
Before I start, I want to thank Ukiyota Publishing for inviting me. I also thank Professor Shatiku to recommend my name for this panel discussion. It's very difficult to speak after my teacher Avvek and also my teacher Anindya. Both of them have touched upon certain words, and I don't know how, while thinking about this topic which has been given to me, when I was writing about it, some of the words that they have mentioned, I also touched upon. Now we all know that translation has always been seen as a traffic, a physical intercultural mobility in between cultures, dialects, geographies and climates, accompanying both flows and interruptions. We think about flows, but we do not think about the interruptions that translation create. Translation is also licit exchange and illicit trades. The world today, as we all know, is characterized by an ever-growing number of contacts, resulting in communication between people with different linguistic and cultural backgrounds. This communication, which we call translation, takes place because of contacts within the areas of business, military cooperation, science, education, mass media, entertainment, tourism, but also because of immigration brought about by labor shortage or political conflicts. Now, translation, we think, act as a bridge between two such polar opposites. Does it take us to any of the poles? Walter Benjamin argued that translation creates a third space between the source and the target. Does translation resolve conflict? Sometimes translation creates conflict. Is translation a peaceful activity? Mistranslation often begins conflict. So how will then translation help us to live peacefully? If we, through the act of translation, understand that there are differences enough amongst us, and thereby should be respectful to those differences, and then through translating diverse worldviews, we attempt to create a hospitable world, a geospace where we can accommodate others, adjust with each other, I think only then we will be able to unleash the potential of immense energy lying in the act of translation. Now, Avvek has talked about how can we translate. I have a suggestion also that can we adopt something new that came up in the field of social science, not in literature. It's called the concept of ligometry, which has been floated by a scholar called Amin Tufani. Now, ligometry is simply defined as a process of measuring things that we know we do not know. So it is imperative for our translator, who does not belong to either the source or the target culture, to point out or to notice the things that he or she does not know about the reality of the varied linguistic communities in and around the place in which either the source text is based or the target text will be. So therefore, translation, the very act, and I argue, is also a ligometric act, because the translator perpetually faces things, words, usages, culture that he or she does not know of the source and or target language. Therefore, the translator, before he or she begins the process of transfer, starts primarily to have a fair idea of things that he or she does not know of the other culture. As stated above, that ligometry is the process of measuring things that we know we do not know. While thinking about the present panel discussion, I request that all of us who are translators can think about, before we start the act of translation, can we think about what I or we do not know about the other, like their food habits, recreations, cultures, festivals, rituals, and most importantly, languages, as well as how do they derive their identity from their language and connect to the land they live in. And Avvek actually has talked about it, that how the translator has gone to the land of the source text to understand what he does not know about them. So, what sort of culture exists amongst them? What is the common language they speak? What are the relationship between their mother tongue and the other tongue? So I suggest that translator thereby should take a back seat and to try to understand that what exactly he or she is trying to translate and why he or she has chosen the text. I will hand you over my fellow speaker, who is a renowned translator, and I'm a deep appreciator of his translation. I'm sure that he will enlighten us with his experience on, and also if you can speak about this suggestion that I raised, and also with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me this morning, and to Dr. Shati Guho for recommending my name. I don't know where to begin. I could just go on and on translating and talking about translation. But let me say, I just returned last evening from Chandannagar. I spent 2 days there working with the author that I'm currently translating. The author's name is Ismail Darbesh, and he wrote a novel called Talashnama that was published in early 2021. Later that year, I heard about it and then decided to publish it, and began work on it last year. The novel began as a series of posts on Facebook, and then a friend of the author took him to a publisher, and the publisher agreed to publish it as a novel and then asked him to remove the Facebook posts. And he wrote the whole novel on his smartphone, and a few weeks back I'd urged him strongly to buy a laptop, which he did, but he's still to get fully familiar with it. So it's a very interesting and novel development. But why I mentioned this novel is the reason I sat with him for 2 days. I had finished the translation. It's a long novel, about 180,000 words in translation. But the novel is set in a Muslim village in Howrah district, a Muslim majority village, and it talks about the politics centering around the mosque in the village and the different factions of the community, and also the communal conflict dimension, the Hindu-Muslim conflict. So when somebody mentioned translation of a culture, so that was what was involved here, the daily life of a Muslim or the contents of his or her head, when they spend some part of the day in some aspect of religion that may be like namaz, what that involves, how there are shortcut namazes, for instance. So I had to understand a lot, and the cues to that were words in the text which were unfamiliar to me. So yesterday after we finished the work, it occurred to me that I also need to have a glossary at the back of the book. But then it became clear to me it's not a glossary explaining the meaning of words, but that glossary would be akin to a mini encyclopedia of Islam, you know. And that excited me a lot, and I was wondering how to do that. So I told the author that we probably have to come back to Chandanagar for another weekend to work on that glossary. How do you translate culture? So let's say you come across an idiom in Bangla, "Shapo morbe, latio bhangbe na." Snake will die and the stick won't break. It's there in many Indian languages. So there is an equivalent to that in English, for instance, like having your cake and eating it too. So as a translator, you know, I can just simply translate it that having your cake and eating it too. But when I am translating, I also have the opportunity to reflect on whether I would like to educate the reader on the mind and language of the original language, you know. So their imagination of that culture, of that nation, did not go to snakes and sticks. So they thought of cakes. So our translation is an opportunity to create exposure of other sections of people to things that they don't know. And there is a one-sidedness in communication, and historically that has been the case. So we in India know lots of English words and French words and so on because we have come across it. But there are very few Indian or Hindi or Bengali words used commonly in other languages. Now it is increasing with globalization. So in my translation, I also try to universalize Bangla words. First word that comes to my mind is Ghomta, because I came across it in the text. I didn't translate it, I just used Ghomta. And now with Google and internet and Wikipedia and all that, I mean, a reader has no excuse to be alarmed by any word. But yet there is, you can't go overboard in this. So yesterday I was talking with my author that at the end of this translation, Talashnama, the reader not only knows the story and what happened and so on, but his vocabulary has increased. He's learnt a number of new words, and not just words, it's gone deeper
Received
than
payment
that.
of 495 rupees on HDFC Bank's Mata Vyapar.
He will use those words in his speech and writing and so on. But besides that, awareness about things that they didn't know. It's not words, it's culture. or religion in this case, because a good part of that novel is about the faith of the characters, that is Islam. It's also important for me, yesterday I was reflecting and telling the author that it's gone beyond my original intention to translate an interesting book. Right now there's something happening in the country, in Haryana, and it's been brewing for many years, and things have come to a very ugly pass now. I have no idea how things will move hereafter. But in a context where a railway police constable picks up his weapon and searches for Muslim passengers and shoots them cold-bloodedly because they are Muslim, in that context, and where the media is exhorting people to do likewise, and the ruling dispensation also, in that context, to be translating a novel which is set deep in the daily life of a Muslim community in a village in West Bengal, which goes into their mind. I hope the outcome of that will be, at least for those who read it, they will be educated, they will know things that they did not know before. And in this country we have this great problem or dilemma of why there is this barrier. You know, a good number of Muslims in this country know a great deal about their Hindu fellow citizens, about Hindu society, religion even. But a very small proportion of educated Hindus know anything about Islam or about Muslim people or about their daily lives or their religious practices and so on, other than some cliched, stereotyped biryani and so on, you know. So now whether a translation can do anything in such a context, because the bigotry and prejudice may exist so deep that no one wants to read such a book. But I believe there will be readers. So I remember while I was translating this book, I remembered some of the books that I had read when I was a university student. There's a American Jewish writer called Chaim Potok. And he wrote a book, I think the title of the novel was In the Beginning. It's about a Jewish boy growing up in the traditional religious school. Like in the Muslim community we have madrasa. So in the Jewish community you have the yeshiva. Yeshiva is the religious school. So it's about a boy who grows up going to the yeshiva, and then when he becomes an adult, I think he forsakes his religion. So for the reader, he wrote it for Americans, and unless you were Jew, you wouldn't know a good part of these detailed things. So when I read it, I didn't know anything about Judaism. So it was a good opportunity to know something. And there was no bigotry or prejudice in me. I don't want to know this. No, nothing like that. So I took it in. So I hope there will be that kind of an impact. And in fact, in the last 9 years as an individual trying to retain one's sanity in the context of what is happening in the country, I have retreated into my translation activity, thinking that that is the best response in this context, and that's the only thing I can do, and that is most needed at this point. I also translated another author. The book is yet to come out. The author's name is Ansaruddin. He's a marginal farmer in Nadia district and a writer. So I translated a non-fiction book of his called Goi Geramir Panchali, which I titled The Song of the Faraway Village. I co-translated it with a friend of mine, Laboni Jongi. The book will come out next year. So there also the author is talking about the rural Muslim milieu and life in West Bengal. which is something that is largely absent in the literature produced over here. But it is not really absent. It is there. Authors like Ansaruddin are writing, but they are not so well known. But in this case, Ansaruddin, because of his sheer quality of his writing, he has made considerable waves. And one thing that he is very proud of is the letter that he received from the late actor Soumitra Chattopadhyay, who read a book of his and found out the author's address and wrote him to express his gratitude for that book. Okay, I just conclude by saying, in talking about translation, I begin by saying that there are two axioms in translation. The first is that translation is impossible. And the second is that translation is necessary. So that dialectic, that tension, that dilemma, that creative challenge is always there. Second is, the slogan of Nike, just do it. There couldn't be a better slogan for translation, just do it, even if you never did it before. And then by beginning by just doing it, you could one day be fairly advanced in your translation and be doing it all day, every day, as in my case. And that's a long journey, and it could be a very rich personal journey which is difficult to express in words. It is like a sadhana, the journey of a translator. So, with those words and with the urge to young students to think about taking up translation, thank you.